The quadratus lumborum is a muscle that's often stiff and achy, and it can be blamed for low back pain. But the approaches used to address this muscle when it's deemed problematic don't stand up to biomechanical scrutiny. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly why that is in a way that you understand and show you exercises that will get to the root causes for lasting relief. Coach E for Precision Movement here, and today I'm going to help you with a quadratus lumborum muscle that is stiff, is achy, that has trigger points, and that is causing you pain and problems. And the way that we're going to do that is first, I'm going to teach you what the quadratus lumborum actually is and what it does. And to do that, we're going to go through some research and we're going to go through some anatomy. So we're going to get into the science a little bit, but then I'm going to go through 5 exercises that will get your quadratus lumborum and the associated muscles working properly so that it's not stiff, tight, and achy anymore. Quadratus lumborum is classically known as an extensor of the spine, meaning it bends your back, and a side bender of the spine. But a study that's titled Anatomy and Biomechanics of the Quadratus Lumborum investigated the action of the quadratus lumborum in cadavers. And what the researchers found was that the magnitudes of the compression forces exerted by the quadratus lumborum on the lumbar spine, the extensor moment, and the lateral bending moment reached no greater than 10% of those exerted by erector spinae and multifidous, 2 other lumbar spine muscles. These data indicate that quadratus lumborum has no more than a modest action on the lumbar spine in quantitative terms. Its actual role in spinal biomechanics has still to be determined. From this study, it's clear that the quadratus lumborum isn't a big contributor to movements of the spine. So what does it actually do? To answer this question, I want to take you through some of the anatomy using the BioDigital app. Okay, here you can see the quadratus lumborum. I'll give you the 3D view. You can see here the attachment points. This is the 12th rib, one of the floating ribs, and then it attaches to the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. It's right down the lumbar spine. So those are the attachment points, and this is why the muscle is often known as a side bender, because if this muscle flexes, you can imagine that you're going to flex and side bend this way, or if both contract at the same time, you can imagine that it's going to extend. But the extension piece, because of where it attaches right on the transverse processes and then on the pelvis here, it's almost impossible for that muscle to extend the lumbar spine. So just biomechanically looking at it, it would be really hard for this muscle to extend the spine. Side bending, yeah, okay, if it contracted, it would pull all of these areas to the side if the pelvis was stable. But again, the lumbar spine doesn't have a lot of movement, generally speaking, and side bending even less so. So there's not much going on there when it comes to either side bending or extension. But if we look at the other muscles around, then we can get an idea of what this quadratus lumborum muscle does. First up, let's look at the diaphragm here. You can see where the diaphragm, the breathing muscle, the main breathing muscle, attaches. It attaches right to that 12th rib, the same as the quadratus lumborum. Now, for the diaphragm to contract and do its thing, it needs a stable anchor point. To get the stable anchor point, because the rib here is floating, it's not attached to the sternum here by connective tissue. If I were to put connective tissue on this, let me just fire it up. You can see there's all the connective tissue. Ignore the arms. But you see the cartilage here connects the sternum to these ribs, but we've got these floating ribs that are just floating around there, and without this connection to the sternum, they're loose. They could move around easily. So what the quadratus lumborum could do is it could stabilize this rib. If it contracts, it stabilizes this rib so that when the diaphragm contracts, it has a stable platform from which to work. Now that's one function. Now another function we can consider is here. This is the psoas in the front, the left psoas. I'm going to take the diaphragm off because we don't need to see that anymore. Look at where the psoas is relative to the quadratus lumborum. That's quadratus lumborum. This is the psoas. It attaches on the lumbar spine on the vertebral bodies, whereas the quadratus lumborum is just slightly behind, attaching to the transverse processes. Now let's add another muscle on there to get an idea of what's really going on here. This is the multifidous. You can see the multifidous, again, attaches to each vertebrae, but here it's just to the back a little bit. It's posterior to the transverse processes. This is more on the process, right on the posterior aspect of the spine here, and then attaching right in, if we zoom in here, right kind of between the two vertebrae in that area. But basically what we have is a muscle in the back, the multifidous, a muscle on the side, the quadratus lumborum, and then a muscle on the front, the psoas, which all have similar segmental attachment points, which to my mind tells me this muscle contributes to segmental stability of the lumbar spine in conjunction with the psoas and the multifidous. So that's how we have to train it, and that's what it's there for. And when we can get all of these muscles doing what they're supposed to do, then the quadratus lumborum can relax and that stiffness and tightness can dissipate. Now you have an understanding of the anatomy of the quadratus lumborum, its function, or I guess my guess as to what its function is. And now what do we do about it if it's stiff and achy? Well, I've got 5 exercises that are going to take you through releasing the muscle and then activating the muscles around the lumbar spine, including the quadratus lumborum, for that segmental stability that you need to keep the spine healthy, which will allow the quadratus lumborum to relax because the other muscles like the psoas, the multifidus, and even the diaphragm are working properly as they should. The first thing we're going to do is release the muscles, the area around the quadratus lumborum. Now it's really tough to isolate the quadratus lumborum because it's a deep muscle and there are layers of muscles on top. We've got the erector spinae, we've got the transverse abdominis, and even the obliques, the internal and the external obliques. So it's tough to get directly on it, but what we can do is get through those areas and on it a little bit and try to release it with our breathing as well. For this, you'll need a hard ball. I've got this massage ball, you get them on Amazon. We're gonna work one side at a time, focusing on to the side of the spine from the pelvis up to the bottom, the 12th rib, the floating rib there. Kind of a rectangular area around there. And you just keep moving it around in different areas. So how you're gonna do it is you're doing one side at a time, obviously. Get the ball in there and you might feel a lot of tension right away. What you wanna do is just relax, take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, every time you do this, you release and kind of melt your body over top of the ball. From here, I'm going to do a posterior pelvic tilt and just lift my butt off the ground and curl and flex my spine. So I'm just gonna curl it like that. And then breathe again and try to relax everything and melt over the body in this position with my butt off the ground. And then I relax and slowly try and melt over and just return to the ground. From there, I move to a different position, maybe about up an inch, and I do the same thing. First, I just melt over, and then I do the pelvic tilt movement, and then I breathe and melt over in this position, and then I relax and let it down. And you keep doing that up and down around that rectangle for about 1 to 2 minutes. You'll hit maybe 6 to 8 different spots. And you can, if you've got some tension, excessive tension in the lumbar spine muscles like the quadratus lumborum or the erector spinae, this technique can help to relax them. And by relaxing these muscles, then we can get a better movement and activation pattern with the exercises to come. The second exercise is the good old bird dog. This one is a staple of back pain programs for good reason because it does so many beneficial things. What's important is getting your setup correct and being very precise with your setup. So your knees are right under your hips, hip width apart. Your hands are right under the shoulders, shoulder width apart. And you keep a neutral spine. So you have a little bit of extension here, fairly flat or slightly flexed thoracic spine, and then you pull your chin in and make your spine long. So this is the setup you want to maintain the whole time. Now, when you're on all fours, you'll have even weight between your hands and your knees, when you go to one leg and the opposite arm, your weight will tend to shift. Try to keep your weight distribution even. I start with my leg. I slowly lift it up straight back, ensuring I'm not shifting my weight over that left leg. And then I lift my opposite arm. I like to lift it at 45 degrees. And I maintain that neutral spine as I'm breathing naturally. Now the tendency will be to hike up here, hike this hip up here, so you close this space down. That could be a sign of excessive quadratus lumborum activation. What you need to do there is just maintain the length, maintain the form. Holding it for 10 seconds, breathing naturally, and then what I like to call a soft landing. Right down and soft landing there. And then you switch. You go to left leg first, up, get it to position. Now if you go too high, you're going to hyperextend the lumbar spine. We don't want that. We don't want to shorten that area up. We want to maintain a neutral spine and work that core stability here. So we've got the leg up, opposite arm at 45 degrees. I'm not shifting my body weight left or right, forwards or back. I'm keeping centered, chin tucked, breathing naturally. Holding for 10 seconds, and then you do your soft landing. And when you do that soft landing, you'll see, oh, how much did my body shift? And you can correct that using the feedback that you achieved there. The Birddog is going to help to specifically get those multifidous muscles on. And the multifidous, if you remember from the biodigital anatomy pictures, is on the back side of the spine. So we get that muscle working. If it's working properly, then the other muscles like the quadratus lumborum don't have to make up for a multifidus that's not working properly. So that's one way we can get the quadratus lumborum to relax, by getting the other synergistic muscles working properly. The third exercise is targeted to the psoas muscle, called the standing slumpy psoas. So getting this muscle working properly makes sure that the front of that stability triad, let's call it the deep spine stability triad of muscles, the psoas, quadratus lumborum, and the multifidus, it makes sure that this muscle is activated and contributing to that function. For this exercise, you need a wall, and you're just going to lean slightly into the wall here, and you're going to start off in a very slumpy and slouched posture, like you're making your body into a C. So it's posterior pelvic tilt and flexing of the lumbar spine. So you're rounding the lumbar spine here. Lean your weight into the wall a little bit, and then as you lift your leg up off the ground slowly, you're straightening up your posture and getting tall into extension. So anterior pelvic tilt, sticking your tail out and extending the lumbar spine, getting the chest out until you're at the top position here. Now here, you're working the iliopsoas muscle. What you want to focus on is lifting up higher without hiking the hip like this, like that. Don't do that. Keep this pelvis drop towards the floor and keep pulling this leg into the pelvis. And that's going to give you good psoas activation. You keep driving up higher, relax the ankle, breathe naturally. And you're trying to keep the activation in through the hip flexors as you lower down. Let's get that eccentric contraction as well. Then you switch sides. You start your body in a C, tuck your tail between your legs, and then lift your leg up off the ground as you straighten up, chest out, head up, chin tucked, and suck the leg in and drop the pelvis towards the ground to keep the pelvis level so you're not hiking your hip. Keep the activation of the psoas on as you lower down so you build that strength through the full range of motion. That is the standing slumpy psoas. It's going to activate that psoas muscle and train it to work in the shortened range of motion and with your spine in a good position. By doing that, we're hoping that that is going to contribute to quadratus lumborum finally being able to relax. The fourth exercise we have to get that quadratus lumborum to relax and to get the other muscles working properly is the good old side plank that, again, I learned from Dr. Stu McGill back in university at the University of Waterloo. Was it 2001? Maybe 2000 I had him as my professor for the first time. But this exercise is another classic in low back pain programs, and I'll show you two versions. The easier version first, you do from the knees. So you can start with your hips bent, your knees bent, and your elbow under your shoulder. And all you do is drive your hips forward so your body's straight. And you want to make sure that your spine is in neutral. You're not sagging your hips down this way or hiking them up here. Either way you do, you're going to shorten up one side of the quadratus lumborum and lengthen the other. We want to train neutral spine. So making sure you're straight here, chin tucked, spine long, breathing naturally. You're holding this for about 10 seconds to start. Now that's the knee version, that's a little easier. The version on the feet's a little more difficult. You want to bring your top leg in front, heel to toe on the sides of your feet. Keep the knees straight. Again, elbow is under your shoulder. And you bridge up, maintaining neutral spine. Hips are forward. You're not bent. You're not sagging. And you're not hiked up. You're straight and you're breathing naturally. Holding for about 10 seconds. In between reps, you just touch down, take the pressure off the muscles for a second, off the body, and then you come back up. So 2-3 seconds down on the ground between reps. What this is doing is it's getting those obliques working, the internal and the external obliques. It's getting the transverse abdominis working, in addition to the quadratus lumborum and likely the psoas and the multifidous, because they're all going to contribute to that unilateral stability in the front. This is called the frontal plane of motion when I do this type of motion, side bending. That's the frontal plane of motion. So they're all contributing to that. And this way we're getting all of these muscles to work to train this neutral spine core stability that's so important for low back health. Last but not least, we've got a little functional integration technique that I came up with to ensure that all of the muscles we've been talking about are working properly and you can use them in your everyday life. I call this the one leg overhead band press. And what we're going to do is set up a band. It could be about chest height, somewhere around there. Mine's anchored to my squat rack right now, but you can anchor it inside a door. And from there, I'm holding on with my left hand. I'm going to lift my left leg up. I'm going to ensure I have an active arch, strong support leg on this side here. And then I'm going to hold my leg, my hips at 90 degrees, my knees about hip level. I'm going to maintain this position, good posture, as I simply press the band up overhead. And then I'm bringing it down, breathing naturally. Nice and slow with the movements. And I'm working the hip flexor on this left side. I'm working all of the stabilizer muscles in the lumbar spine. And I'm challenging myself to maintain good posture and stability in this dynamic movement. So this is just something that I came up with to further challenge these muscles and create smarter muscles, a smarter body, so it can respond to these different demands that you need in everyday life and sport, where you're moving around, you're on one foot, and you need to have stability in all these different situations. So those are the 5 exercises that I've got for you to help you with your tight and achy and painful quadratus lumborum. To summarize, we started with active self-myofascial release for the lumbar extensors. Do that for 1 to 2 minutes per side. Then we went to the Birddog. Do that for 1 to 2 sets, around 3 reps per side, holding each rep for 10 seconds. Next, we performed the standing Slumpy Psoas exercise. Do 2 sets of 4 to 6 repetitions per side, holding each rep for 5 seconds. Then we went to the side bridge. You can do 2 sets, 3 to 5 reps per side, holding for 10 seconds. And we finished off with the one leg overhead band press. You can do 2 to 3 sets of anywhere from 6 to 10 reps. So there you have the precision movement approach to dealing with a problematic quadratus lumborum. Hope you liked that. I hope you liked all the science and the breakdown of the anatomy and the biomechanics. If you did like it, let me know below. If you have any questions or comments, leave one down below. And check out these other videos that will help you on your journey to moving freely and without pain. And if you have low back pain, make sure you sign up for the low back pain solution, because that is a comprehensive, progressive approach that takes concepts like you've learned in today's video, but makes it easy to follow over the long run. There's over 40 exercises, multiple phases to make sure you're able to move freely and without pain.